I'm a local veterinarian here in Knox County, and I'm also a Board of Health member, so this kind of fits perfectly for me. And I was asked to speak last year, and I thought it was really great getting information out in the community. Obviously, I can speak to you about the animal side of things and what we can do to prevent and kind of just give you guys some numbers. And so, did you want everybody to introduce individually, or just me keep going? Just keep going. Okay, perfect. So, I am not super great with my technology, so just a little synopsis, and I won't steal your thunder about what Lyme is and all of those things. So there's lots of tick-borne diseases. We're focusing mostly today on Lyme, but I am going to throw in a little plug about some other ones that we're seeing, or at least I'm seeing in my practice. But it's Borrelia burgdorferi. It's a bacteria transmitted by ticks. And it is harbored in small mammals and birds. So they're the resource, and then the ticks get on them, and then they move around. So that's how they're infected. It was first identified in Lyme, Connecticut, which is why we call it Lyme disease. Not Lyme's disease, Lyme. And there was lots of children that were becoming sick with symptoms of arthritis, but I will let the expert go into all of that far more than I can tell you. So, in my world in veterinary medicine, thankfully, I think we have a little bit of an advantage where we screen our patients regularly for tick-borne diseases, where in human medicine, you guys aren't being screened routinely unless you have symptoms. And so I think the really cool thing about that, and animals in general, is we tend to have early warning of what's moving into the county, what's moving into the area, because we're going to see it in our animals first before we start seeing humans become infected. And so for me, just the updated data that I have in my practice alone, which is, here in Knox County, in 2025, I had 63 patients, or 63 dogs that were Lyme positive, okay, in just my practice when I see. I screened 1,529 animals. And so that was basically a 1 in 24. So for every 24 dogs I tested, 1 popped up positive, okay? So far in 2026, which we are just in the middle of May, I've had 33 positive cases for Lyme disease, okay? So we are continuing to see that cycle through. Thankfully, for me, many of my patients are asymptomatic when we screen them, and so again, we do this test. It's called a 40X test, and it screens for heartworm disease, which is from mosquitoes, but it screens for Lyme disease, Ehrlichia, and anaplasmosis. All 3 of those things are tick-borne, okay? And some of these patients are positive for more than one disease, right? So you can be positive for Lyme and anaplasmosis, or positive for Lyme and Ehrlichia, or if you want to really get crazy, all 3. Thankfully, many of our patients, when we're screening them, are asymptomatic, which is great. We do see the sick patients that come in, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. For me, in my world, dogs and horses are most affected by Lyme disease. And so horses also, and fun fact, that the test that we use, it's for dogs, but actually it will screen anybody's blood. My practice is over on Harcourt Road, but obviously I see patients from all over the county, and some that are not in our county, although most of my client base is here in Knox. So there is also something, if you like to nerd out on things, or maybe get grossed out, there is something called the Companion Animal Parasite Council, and they have a really cool website. I did link it there just for the data that I pulled for Knox County, but it breaks down different parasitic diseases by state and then further by county, and you can search Lyme, you can search heartworm disease, you can search intestinal parasites, and it will give you data. Now, I will say that I think the data is a little bit underreported, and so I think the real numbers are much higher than what they have listed, but it gives you at least a place to start and to kind of look to see where you can identify it. So for them, in Knox County in 2025, they had 892 positive cases, and that is just in dogs that they're reporting, okay, for the county in 2025 in dogs. So that their number was 1 in 8 patients being tested as positive. So that's high. And they had a total of 6,480 dogs that were tested. So I will mention briefly, I know that generally we call this, is about Lyme, but it's a tick talk. So I just personally feel like I had been seeing a whole lot of anaplasmosis positive cases, which I historically have not seen a lot of. So in 2025, I had a total of 27 patients that tested positive for anaplasma, which is another tick-borne disease. And at that point in time, I had, again, that same data was 1,529 patients were tested, so 1 in 56. Oh, I forgot to change that from Lyme. It says anaplasma. Just quickly doing things. So far this year in 2026, I've had 19 positive cases, and I've run 660 tests. So I'm at 1 in 34 on anaplasma, which is a huge jump. I think in 1 week I had 2 anaplasma positive patients. I'm like, what is this? I haven't seen it this active. So talking to our epi guy, I'm interested to see the human numbers in the next couple years if they start to increase, because we're starting to see it in our canine patients. Thankfully, again, many of my patients are asymptomatic for anaplasmosis and don't develop clinical symptoms, but we do check their blood counts when we have an anaplasma positive patient. Cattle and horses, in my world, are most affected by anaplasma, and especially with cattle, that can become a really debilitating disease and can be a really costly disease for producers. So that is a little scary. From the Companion Animal Council in 2025, they had 378 positive cases, so they were getting 1 in 20. So again, I'm interested to see the next couple years what kind of comes of that. So back to Lyme, but really for us, even the other tick-borne diseases, anaplasma, Ehrlichia that we talk about, main symptoms are going to present with joint pain and fever. So we'll see these dogs come in to me, and sometimes the symptoms can be mild and sometimes they are really severe. So we'll have owners complain that their dog's lame, and we'll say, okay, well, what leg? And they'll say, well, it seems like the front leg, and then it might be the back leg, and these dogs are shifting and they're moving around because it's not any one specific area that's painful. I have had dogs come in so sick that they can't walk, that they're screaming because it just hurts. They almost always will have a fever when they come in sick like that. And I will say almost always owners told me that they never saw the tick. They had no idea it was there. When we test positive and we screen, owners say, well, I didn't see a tick. I didn't see a tick. That is very common, and I'll show you. I have another slide to kind of show you some of that. And most of these are indoor family pets. We're not talking about a dog tied outside to a dog box or some farm dogs. We're talking about your golden retriever, your chihuahua, your fluffy doodle that's living in your house, sleeping in your bed, that is testing positive for this kind of stuff. The severe cases of Lyme disease will see kidney failure and damage. So we always will run blood work on these guys. We want to check their urine proteins and see how things are going. This can be fatal, and I have absolutely euthanized more dogs than I would like to say because of Lyme disease that we couldn't get in front of. That by the time that we get to them, they're already too sick, okay? We have saved a lot of them, and I'm very proud of that, but it is not just a no big deal thing when these guys get sick with Lyme disease. So it absolutely can end in euthanasia for your pet. And so for me, we want to prevent this from happening because I would much rather not have you bring me in a sick dog. So treatment. When we have just these asymptomatic patients or we have the joint pain fever, we're talking about 30 days of antibiotics for these guys, and usually we'll use something called doxycycline for most of them, which thankfully is super inexpensive, and it's most of the time very well tolerated in our patients. I do have some injectable antibiotic options for dogs that aren't great about taking medicine. It's crazy expensive, especially for our bigger dogs. And then we obviously provide supportive care for the fever, the joint pain, the discomfort. It is amazing, though. You can take a dog that comes in, and again, the dog that came in that couldn't walk because it was so sick, and 36 hours later, it's up and moving. So you can make a huge difference very quickly with appropriate medications, and they're like new dogs in just a couple days. For the patients that have Lyme nephritis, which is when it gets into their kidneys, those we're talking about hospitalization. We're talking about intensive care. We're talking IV fluids, medications, immunosuppressives. It is a lot. And again, it is not a guarantee that your dog's going to survive. And it can be quite a long time. So we want to not have that happen is the goal. So how do we prevent that from happening? Far and away, it's going to be flea and tick prevention that you guys use year-round for your pets. And there is no tick season. I will say it drives me insane, the amount of people, and it comes with good intentions, that say, oh, I don't need to use that prevention in the wintertime. We don't need it. We absolutely need it year-round. Please don't only treat for 6 months out of the year or 8 months out of the year. Basically, you're playing Russian roulette at that point in time, and the failure of that is going to potentially be huge. I personally like to use either the prescription oral or the injectable preventions because those are going to have the fastest, what we call kill times for the tick, okay? So any preventative that you use, it is not going to be a force field. We all want this to be like a force field on our pet that we're never going to see a tick. That is not realistic. The ticks are still going to get on your animal. The goal is that they die before they can transmit these types of diseases. And so that's where the oral preventions have an advantage there, that they can kill before the tick can attach long enough to transmit. It gets a little dicey with anaplasmosis because anaplasma, the transmission time is really fast, which you'll be able to probably go into more than I can. But with Lyme, we really think you need about 24 hours attachment before we start to transmit that. And so if we can kill that tick before that happens, and that's where, again, we're going to have better efficacy with the oral or the injectable preventions. The newest injectable prevention, it actually lasts 12 months. And I love it because it takes the human out of the equation. I give it, and I know that I can protect your dog for the next 12 months because we're all humans, right? And we forget things, and it's like, oh, did I give that? Did I not give that? At least I know that it's there, and I can protect your dog even when you've forgotten to do so. So I love the injectable. We also have a Lyme vaccination, and so we can prevent not the exposure, but we can hopefully prevent this dog from getting very sick through vaccination, okay? So it's, to me, like I want to drive safely, but I'm still going to put my seatbelt on, right? I'm going to drive home, and I'm going to not plan on getting in a car accident, but if I do, I want to have protection. And so using your flea and tick prevention is going to hopefully prevent the tick from ever getting there. In case there's a failure or something else, your seatbelt is going to be your vaccination. The only species we have an approved Lyme vaccine for is for dogs, but I know there are some veterinarians, depending on a risk basis, that use it in horses, kind of off-label, but that would be something you need to talk to your veterinarian about. You can use flea and tick preventions, mostly tick preventions, talking about in horses and in cattle. I have horses and cows at home, and I also use regularly preventions on them as well, because I'm crazy pants. And so what stuff doesn't work? Treating your yard, right? The natural collars, everybody wants natural stuff, right? I don't want to use chemicals any more than the next person, and if I have options to use something that's effective, I am all for it. But the essential oils are not going to work here. The natural collars are not going to work. The cheapy collars, you know, the Hearts products and all that stuff, don't sue me, those don't work either. And so we want to make sure we're using a good prevention. I have people tell me all the time, I don't need prevention, I check for ticks. Well, you're not going to see them, and by the time you've found an engorged tick, it is too late. You're already exposing your pet. So checking for ticks is not prevention. My pop-up always used to say, like, that's like closing the barn door after the cows are out. So, is this I have a video here. I don't know. Okay, I will play it like this, I think. Oh, you know what? I don't have the internet hooked up, so I don't know if it'll play. Well, that's a bummer because it was really cool. I don't know if I can upload the slides later, but basically on that you can see, well, you can actually see the picture even though it doesn't play on the video. Basically this was, these were some ticks that I pulled off of a cat that I was doing surgery on. And just for size reference, I wanted to put them next to a dime. And so this is what I talk about when people say, I don't see ticks on my pet. You are not going to see a tick that is smaller than the L on a dime. And I pulled one off that was smaller than that, but I squished it when I was pulling it off, so I couldn't get a good video of it. But that's what I'm saying about, you think about the fur on your pets. You are not going to see those. So again, protecting these guys is going to be year-round flea and tick prevention, vaccination, and then I'm a huge proponent of screening for these diseases so that we know what we've got and what we don't. And then as well, from the human health standpoint, when I do have a pet that tests positive, it's a great reminder for the people that live with it, right? Who spends more time with their animals than us? If your kids are running around in the same yard that the dog is, you need to be aware that your dog tested positive for Lyme, because that's important information for your children and all the other things. And so, again, it's just valuable information to monitor and see where you're going. And this was another really cool video that I don't have on there. But I actually do have it on our hospital YouTube page and stuff. But when we had this winter, and it was January, and we had a foot of snow on the ground, and it was -7 degrees in the morning I came to work, I pulled an engorged tick off of a family's golden retriever. They had stopped their flea and tick prevention because they didn't think that they needed it because there was all that snow. And so I went outside and I took a video standing in snow to prove my point that you definitely need your preventions. There's no such thing as tick season. They are active all year round. They are slower moving in the winter, admittedly, but they are still there and they will still infect your pet. So please, please, please use your preventions. So yeah, that would have been, I'm sad. So there's yet another time I pulled ticks off of a patient, and I like to use a dime, I guess, for some reason. So, any specific questions or anything? Yes. That's So that's a great question. So the question was, the patients that I had test positive, were they on flea and tick prevention? Most of them not consistently. So it's the same thing where owners buy prevention and they forgot to give it, or maybe they were a little lax. And we'll see a lot of times when you can look at owners, we hear this all the time too, they come in for their annual, like, oh, do you need to get more of your flea and tick and your heartworm prevention? Oh no, doc, I've got plenty of it at home. And it's like, you bought 6 months of it a year ago, so it seems to, and it's a monthly product, so somehow it's stretching. And again, it's not bad intentions, it's just life, right? And so yes, some of them are on prevention, some of them are not, but the far and away, it's not consistent. Now, I will say that I have had 2 cases I can think of with anaplasmosis specifically, where I have owners that get 12 months of product religiously, they do not miss, and we can sometimes see a failure for anaplasmosis transmission, even with routine prevention, because of it is so fast to transmit. So that we can have. Not all of those patients, talking about dogs, that tested positive needed treatment, okay? When we have them test positive, we'll run a secondary set of tests to check those kidney values, and we'll do something called a quantitative C6 level. It tells us how much Lyme is circulating and whether or not we need to treat, because not everybody does. And so it's not just a blanket, here's your antibiotics if somebody tests positive. We do some additional testing to see whether that's needed, and then we also use those tests long-term to monitor patients to see, because once they test positive on that 40X test, it's what's called an antibody test, they will test positive for years, even after treatment, and then it's hard for us to determine what's a new exposure, right? So just because you tested positive in 2023 doesn't mean you didn't get bitten by another tick in 2025 because you're still not using your prevention consistently, which, believe it or not, I still have happened. I've had dogs hospitalized in the hospital for a week, almost die, and I still have owners that don't keep the dog on tick prevention afterwards. I'm like, please, 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 please. So cats need it, flea, tick prevention, so important. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think your risk for ticks on a truly indoor-only cat is low. It's not zero, right? Because you still have humans that go in and out and other animals. I do still recommend prevention because the amount of indoor-only cats that have fleas is astronomical because of the humans going in and out and the other animals. So your indoor-only cat absolutely needs parasite prevention. I think we could probably debate whether it truly needs tick prevention, but it absolutely needs flea prevention. And rabies vaccine, if I'm going to throw that in there. It's called Brevecto Quantum. So that is the one that's currently available in the United States here. It was approved in the US, I want to say in September or October of last year. Our colleagues in Europe have had it before that. It's a fluorolana molecule, and so these basically these small little microbeads that have the medicine in it, and it's an injection, and then it's slowly released over a 12-month period. And ironically, it is less medicine in that injection than if you gave a pill every month because of how I'll have people asleep here in a minute, but the way that the products work, and to get FDA approval, you have to have a 90% efficacy for the duration of whatever the time of the medicine is. And so if it's 1 month, you have to be able to maintain 90% effectiveness or more over that 1 month period of time. So essentially then you're bolusing every single month versus giving the injection and having it slowly release. You don't have to have that bolus. So it's actually less drug for the patient if you can do it as an injection. I think it's more effective because it takes us, the person, out of the equation. So yeah, I love that for it. It's Brevecto Quantum, Quantum, Quantum. It's prescription, so you'd have to have it injected. And there's a lot of, like when we mix it up and we pull it into the syringe, it has to be injected within 2 minutes. So there's a lot of handling stuff with it, which is why it's not just available over the counter. Oh, yep, sorry. What the name of the product was and whether or not I felt it was more effective. And I do feel like the injectable prevention is really effective because it removes the human error out of the equation of us having to administer something consistently. I will say the injections is not the cheapest option on the table, but there are lots of different choices. And again, these are conversations you should have with your veterinarian about what options you have, not with Mary on Facebook or other sources that are not great. I love social media for a lot of reasons, and then it's really awful for a lot of other ones. And the amount of misinformation that I get on a daily basis from people reading something online from a friend's cousin's uncle is a lot. So I love owners that bring questions into their appointment and say, hey doc, I would love to talk about this, or I heard this, and let's have a conversation. I think that is absolutely amazing, and I love it when my clients are engaged in their patient's care. That is hugely important. So I love, love, love that, but definitely don't take it for gospel what you get online. Anybody else? I do have to run after this because I have some cows that need tending to tonight. So I thank you guys for the opportunity to speak again. If you have specific questions that I haven't answered, you can, I don't know how we're emailing or what, I'm happy to help. I have a wonderful team of nurses at my hospital, and they're always happy to answer questions as well if you have specific product questions. Sometimes we can help with that, just basic questions over the phone to make specific recommendations for your pet. I would obviously need to see your pet to be able to see what we've got going on and know its medical history. But talk to your veterinarian about products. Make sure you're using something consistently. The best medicine is prevention. I would much rather be proactive than reactive.
So I want to affirm what you were saying about no tick season. As a local hunter, I've treated my hunting clothes with a product which is very effective when I'm in the woods. But I had my tree stands out, and I was like, well, I'll get them in the winter, and went out on a very cold day like
And I hate ticks. Hate ticks.
Well, it's like a shirt, ticks suck.
They do. They do suck. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Glen Needham, who? Are you gonna go? Push play? Go. Okay, thank you. My name's Glen Needham. I live in Delaware County, but not that far from this county, and it's kind of the second home for us. So I'm going to cover some similar things with you that Dr. Rogers mentioned, but I'm a tick person, so it's going to be tick heavy. And the real purpose is for you to do risk assessment. And I think she mentioned about buckling your seatbelt. It's kind of the same philosophy where are you going to decide when you're going to buckle up and when you're not. When you go outside, you put on sunscreen. And there are all these things you do as a part of your routine. So now we want you to fold in more care for yourself, and the prevention part is a whole lot easier than dealing with an infection that may be misdiagnosed or not caught for some time. So anyway, so I'm going to kind of unpack the invasion of Ohio and Knox County by ticks, and it really can change your use of your property. And I see it's maybe somewhat of an older crowd. We're seeing taking care of our grandkids and that sort of thing. So anyway, it's risk assessment without scaring you too badly, and that you're in charge of your own protection. So anyway, so you can see Star there. She's out, picking up ticks, and we're trying to figure out if it's going to be a really big tick season. And so anyway, a big tick. And what we're going to find out is it's small ticks that are the problem. So here are my key points. I'm a recovering academic. I worked at Ohio State for 36 years, and so I usually have handouts and PowerPoint. So this is partly therapy for me. And so I do have some handouts, and I think I have enough to pass around for the group here. I'm just going to, it's kind of a summary. There you go. Okay. I'm going to hit my key points in case you nod off. Ohio is in a zone of emerging tick and tick-borne diseases. And I'll be showing you some maps. And the black-legged tick or deer tick is the one that's the most important tick, and it's the most important disease. But they're now in your backyard. And most people and most dogs acquire Lyme disease from the bite of a nymphal tick, which is the size of a poppy seed, after it's fed, okay? And as she mentioned, there is no ticks. The tick season is 12 months long. There is a tick season, but it lasts all year. Certain times of the year are more risky than others. I just spoke with the Lyme disease expert in Ohio. Yesterday I spent about an hour in her office, and they've been testing ticks for a while. They have a testing program at Ohio State, and 1 in 2 ticks are infected with the Lyme organism. So you have a 50-50 chance that tick feeds long enough that the dog, the grandchild, the person may get Lyme disease. And you may get a second disease as well. So there are sometimes co-infections. The tick has been found now in all 88 counties, and more prevalent in some counties than others. The actual number of human cases is an order of magnitude higher than what is reported. So these diseases are all underreported. And just to give you an example, they more than doubled from 22 to 23, from 554 reported cases to 1,300, and then 1,700 last year, and in 2024. In 2025, it was almost 2,800. So you add a zero to that, and now you're looking at 28,000 cases probably. So now we're hearing our neighbor, people that we know, ourselves, we're under a lot of pressure. And so the idea is that by playing from simple rules, you can limit your risk to a very low number, okay, after setting all these bad things. But I'll show you a graph, but 60-fold increase in the number of Lyme cases since 2010, okay? So the tick world has gotten much more complicated. When I came to Ohio in 1978, all we had were dog ticks. People were amazed that you could identify a tick over the phone. Where did you get it? Ohio. It's a dog tick. Are there any questions? You identified that tick on the phone? Yeah, because that's what we have here, but now that's not the story. So what you want to do is assess your risk in Knox County and or surrounding counties. So there are 3 bad actors. American dog tick, which I just mentioned. It lives in grassy meadows along roads and paths. And it's the largest tick of the group. And it's the tick that bites most people and most dogs, okay? And it does have a season. It started in April and it lasts through July. And then they dive in the turf and wait until next year. A dog tick can live for 3 years without feeding. Okay, so when there's a bad tick here, it's probably because you got survival of 3 generations overlapping out there. So it's why you can have so many of these ticks around. I'll mention it several times, but less than 1% of these ticks are infected with Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Okay, so that's why we can have so many tick bites from this particular species, but the chance of getting spotted fever in Ohio is extremely low. Okay, then the black-legged deer tick, the one most of us are here that are interested in, it's a much smaller tick, and it lives in a woodland habitat. Okay, so you're not going to get it in an open meadow and a grassy area. Generally speaking, it's very susceptible to desiccation. Okay, so it's why it likes to live in the shade, and most of the animals it feeds on are in that environment as well. And it transmits a number of diseases we'll talk about in a minute. Lone Star tick is becoming more common. It's very common and has been common in southern Ohio for a long time, but it's working its way up. And it also transmits several diseases, and but one that most people have heard of is the red meat allergy, which is essentially not a disease, but a response to that you may have eating red meat after being bitten by a Lone Star tick. So they live in more shrubby environments, not in the wooded and not in open grass, kind of shrubby areas. And so we'll unpack each tick a little bit, what the risks are, a little bit about their biology. And one of the first things is site preference. The American dog tick on the bottom here, it definitely prefers the head and neck area. And so this is why a lot of people think they fall out of trees, because they find them on their head and neck area. So we're wearing big floppy hats, trying to keep the ticks off our heads. And I'm thinking if I'm a tick, it's a bigger landing area. So somehow it defies logic, But you can see it'll attach other places, but it'll crawl past all sorts of good skin to get to your head and neck area. Whereas the black-legged deer tick, when it finds skin, it attaches, okay? And this is, you want to avert your eyes, this is tick reproduction. Shows you ticks mating, which generally occurs on the host. The female tick, once he's fed, and this is a smaller tick, she lays about 2,000 eggs. It takes her days to lay that many eggs. And then the eggs hatch, and when they do, you have literally thousands of tiny little ticks. This is why you can be walking through an area, no ticks, and then you look down and you've got ticks crawling up your pant legs. And it's okay for me to say that here. It's more like a spiritual experience when you see ticks crawling up your pant legs in those numbers, okay? And you'd think, why didn't I put on tick repellent or something like that? So ticks mate on the host. They don't find their mate in the grass. It's too big of an area, and deer ticks don't even have eyes, so how would they find their mate? So ticks, except for the genus Ixodes, some of those mate off the host, but this is why you can oftentimes find a partially engorged tick with another tick right there attached with it, and that's a male mating while the female tick is also feeding. So right here in Knox County, you go outside in your backyard, the American dog tick is active, and in July, the hot part of the season, they pretty much go away. So there is a season for that tick. Lone Star tick comes out about the same time, and it lasts a little longer in July. But we never see American dog tick, immature ticks, because they don't feed on people at all. They only feed, the larval and nymphs of American dog ticks don't bite people or pets. All we see are the adults. The Lone Star tick, you can see the family picture here, like in the church directory, you know, all the kids and everybody there. So you can see the larva, the nymph, and the engorged female. You can see how large they get. And so there's a season in July when all three life stages are present, and larvae, nymphs, and adults. So we'll over time, we'll be seeing more and more of these Lone Star ticks up here in Knox County. And you can see the black-legged tick. It's also the family picture because all three life stages, larvae, nymphs, and adults, will bite people and pets. And their activity period is sort of seasonal for each stage, but generally speaking, one stage or another is active all year long. And in the winter, the adult stage is active when the temperature's above freezing. So you can find these ticks in January, February, when we had the really cold snap here in the snow. As soon as the temperature got above freezing, the multiflora rows and different plants coming out of the snow, the ticks would be on the tips of those branches waiting for a deer or something to walk by, or a person. Okay, so you can see each tick has its own idiosyncrasies when it's present, that sort of thing. They have different diseases that they transmit, and so it's very helpful to be able to identify the tick that's attached, so that you may have an idea if you start coming down with symptoms. What tick was attached may give you a clue as to what disease you may have picked up, or diseases. This is an old slide, but the different colors show you the different diseases transmitted by ticks nationally. So you've got Lyme disease is purple, spotted fever, red, anaplasmosis, kind of a yellow, ehrlichiosis blue, babesiosis green, tularemia is kind of an orange. So you can see most of the tick activity is east of the Great Plains, right? That's the first thing. It can occur in other places in the country, but this is why oftentimes they ask you about travel history. Back in the days when we didn't have deer ticks, that's pretty much how anybody was diagnosed with Lyme disease in Ohio, as they traveled to the northeastern United States where it was common, and then you came home and got sick. But now you don't have to leave the state. You don't have to leave Knox County. You can get Lyme disease right here today. So anyway, the map is filled in considerably for Lyme disease, and I'll show you some more maps on that. But you can see the diseases, as you go further south, you're more likely to get spotted fever, much less likely to get Lyme disease, and that sort of thing. But in Ohio, actually all of these 6 diseases have been reported in the state. So it's you can't, and so this is what makes it difficult. Most of these diseases start out very similar in the symptomology, very much like a flu-like symptom. So this was crazy when we went through the pandemic, because you got people getting flu-like symptoms, but some of those people were getting tick-borne diseases. It wasn't COVID, right? Oh, that's just in case you didn't know where Ohio was, okay? All right. So the black-legged tick has a buffet. It's not a really perfect term, but a buffet of diseases that they can transmit. Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, anaplasma, what Dr. Rogers mentioned, ehrlichiosis, babesiosis, and Powassan virus. So this one tick could transmit all those diseases. And so Powassan virus is not treatable with antibiotics. It's light, sort of flu-like symptoms. Babesiosis is similar to malaria, and so the disease symptoms are very similar, but it does not respond to doxycycline, which is usually the antibiotic of choice. So let's say you're pretty sick, you get on doxycycline, but you're still sick. This is when the healthcare professionals should think, could be you've got more than one disease, and it may take a different antibiotic to treat you for, it will take a different antibiotic to treat you for babesiosis. And then, of course, there's just Lyme disease, okay? So more and more testing is being done of ticks in Ohio, so we're getting a better picture of what this buffet is doing in the state and where parts of the state where some of these diseases are more common. Okay. So let's just start with the Lone Star ticks, just for fun. And you can see the female with a white dot on her back. Makes her easy to identify. But you can see the darker orange counties are the ones where it's an established population. Doesn't mean it's everywhere, but it can be found routinely in the state. So the red meat allergy that's being picked up by our allergy docs, it's been showing up for quite some time in the southern counties. But allergy docs in our area are starting to see more and more people develop this response to tick feeding, followed by red meat consumption. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I personally haven't collected right around where I live, but the OSU tick testing lab, they're getting Lone Star ticks in from this county, Delaware County. So it's moving its way further up north. It's not as cold hardy as the black-legged ticks are. Okay, so nymphs and adults, I don't have a picture of the nymphs, but the nymphs and adults can also transmit ehrlichiosis. You probably haven't even heard of that disease, but it can be severe, but it has very similar flu-like symptoms and can be tested. It can be detected with blood tests. This is to show you how fast a Lone Star tick nymph is. If you want to enter a tick in a race and you want to win, Lone Star ticks are more like spiders than they are ticks. You can see how fast this little guy can crawl. If it gets on your pant legs and heads north, in 10 minutes it can find skin if you haven't had a barrier or worn clothing that restricted them to the outside of your clothing. So sorry, I ran that too many times. Okay. Okay, this is the alpha-gal. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but the hallmark part of it is that, let's say you eat a half-pound hamburger at your favorite joint at 7 o'clock in the evening. You may not have symptoms to consuming that red meat until 2 or 3 in the morning. So most food-related allergies occur really very quickly after consumption, peanut allergies and those sorts of things. So this is one reason it was hard to diagnose and connect what was happening to a tick bite. So now this can be tested for very easily with a blood test. So more and more people are showing up with this. And so not being bit by Lone Star ticks is a good strategy. And you may be off red meat, mammalian meat, off for a period of time, but you can, patients can recover from this. In the southern part of the state, though, just walking up to get the mail, taking the dog out, the Lone Star ticks seasonally are so prevalent that if you're not, protecting yourself, it's pretty easy to pick up a Lone Star tick bite. All right, the black-legged tick. One thing you notice is that the dog tick and Lone Star tick have ornamentation, some sort of marking on the back. This tick has no ornamentation, and so it's pretty easy to identify just from that perspective. But it's a much smaller tick than you're used to looking for. And there's a bullseye rash there, just one example. And your Knox County health folks have some really great pictures. Maybe you'll want to have a picture of that instead of your grandkids, and so you'll be able to identify what's going on. But it's usually bigger than 3 inches in diameter. And the reason I say that, you can have a 3-inch spot after a bite from a tick, and that's just a response to the tick bite. So generally speaking, if that rash gets bigger than 3 inches, then it should be considered maybe this isn't just a reaction to the tick bite. So an important point to make is that the larvae and nymphs of these ticks all feed on the same rodents and birds and that sort of thing. So if you send a deer tick in to OSU and they test it, it could have the Rocky Mountain spotted fever organism in it, but the tick is unable to transmit it, okay? Likewise, the American dog tick can be infected with the Lyme disease organism, but it can't transmit it, okay? So it isn't like all ticks are carrying all these things and can transmit all of these things. So that's why it's very helpful to know that if you pulled a tick off, if nothing else, take a picture of it with your smartphone, put it on magnification so you can see the tick, generally speaking, and they're going to be pretty easy to identify. So that's a very helpful thing to do. And so both the nymphs and the adults transmit the Lyme disease organism, and that's the real problem. Most people pick up the disease from the nymph, which is the size of a poppy seed. Okay? This shows you, probably won't be able to see it in the back, but Knox County is right up there at the top of the list of when ticks have been tested between 29 and 24, almost 60% of the ticks are positive for Lyme disease. So you have more than a 50-50 chance if the tick is on long enough to pick up this disease, okay? All right. The last of the trio, the American dog tick, you can see very ornamented and large, and a lot of times you feel them crawling on you. Okay? And this is why doing a shower after you've been outside, if the ticks haven't been attached for very long, it's pretty easy to wash them off. And so you may not see them until they go down the drain, but that's not a bad outcome, you know. And this tick, as I said, can be infected with Lyme disease, but it doesn't transmit it, which is really good, if there is good news in anything I have to say here. And then the adults are the only ones that transmit the disease, and they're the adult stage is the only one that bites pets and people. So it's a large tick. This is the one we're calibrated to look for on our pets and on our kids, etc. So the really good news is less than 1% are infected with in fact, the OSU tick testing lab has been up and running for 2 years. They have not detected one dog tick with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and they've been sent in from all over the state. So the infection percentage is really low. So we get a lot of people bitten by it, and a lot of times they can be on for a long period of time. It only takes 30 minutes for transmission to occur. This is why if you're out in the field and you have a dog tick on you, don't wait till you get home. As soon as you see it, remove it. And there are all kinds of tick removal tools and things out there, but you can use your finger and thumb and pull it off, generally speaking, pretty easily. Okay. This is the map for Rocky Mountain spotted fever from 2015 to 24. The darker the county, the higher incidence of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And the red dots are for 2024, I believe. No, 2025, last year. So you can see there were none in Knox County, but you can see it's a darker shade of blue. So there have been cases in this county. But as I've been describing this, the southern counties here have lots of Lone Star ticks, lots of American dog ticks, and fewer black-legged ticks, depending on where you are. So if you're trying to think where you're going to go to your next state park and spend a few days or go hiking, you could just use that as a, well, if I want to avoid ticks, northwest Ohio is a little safer maybe, okay? All right. So this shows you the size comparison. See the difference in size between the female American dog tick and these black-legged deer ticks, and the bad actor, this is the nymphal stage right here, so you can see how small it is. I put this up because the various symptoms, this is Lyme disease, but a lot of the diseases that we've been talking about, anaplasmosis, ehrlichiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme disease, they all start out very similarly. fever and chills, headache, muscle and joint pain, sometimes nausea, cognitive issues, sleep disturbances. These are some that are later in the infections. And then you have this rash that's larger than 3 inches, and it can be within 3 days of a tick bite, and it could be as long as a month after the tick bite. So 30 days out, you may have forgotten that you even had an exposure to a tick bite. And sometimes the rash is not real bright. Sometimes it's on a part of the body that you haven't seen in a very long time. I call it the dark side of the moon. You know, who's running around looking at their backside to see if you have a bullseye rash. So, and that bullseye rash will go away, and the spirochete moves from the skin into different parts of the body. So this is why you can have knee swelling, achy, all kinds of things, cognitive issues. I don't know about you, but I woke up half those symptoms every morning when I get out of bed, especially more cognitive issues and sleep disturbances. Okay. So this map I just put up there, it's 2022. Look at the sort of dark dots here. The dark dots is a single case, and it's where the person lives that got the disease. It is not where necessarily they were infected. Okay, so keep that in mind. So just focus on that spot and look at the next one. You can see how much darker it filled in, and it comes right into Knox County here, where we're seeing more and more human cases. So this is why I call this a zone of emergence, and it pretty much corresponds to where eastern deciduous forest is. As you go further north and west, it's more farm fields and less deciduous forest. And this is because the tick prefers shaded, woody environments, not open areas. And this shows you the life cycle for the tick. It's 2 years, the life cycle to get through the life cycle. And so the adult stage is gray. The nymphs, when most people get Lyme disease, and you see it started in April. The health department, or the testing lab was already getting nymphal ticks in April. And you can see it peaks now and then continues even into the fall and the winter. And so you have multiple stages active at the same time. Right now you could go out and do a tick drag, and you would pick up adults, and right now you'd start picking up the nymphal stage. The big peak of larvae there, the green, it looks awful, but usually when they send in ticks, it's a lot of them, because people walked into that space where there are a lot of larvae, but they're not infected with Lyme disease. So when a female lays eggs, they're not infected with the Lyme disease organism. So they have to acquire it from feeding on mice. So this is how it happens. These larvae come after the nymphal stage, and so this essentially breaks the cycle of Lyme disease in nature. The fact that it's not transovarially transmitted, and that the larvae come out after the nymphs. And so it's kind of a freak of nature that Lyme disease even can exist in nature, but it's because of this 2-year life cycle. So this is the most dangerous time of the year. We call it a tick season, but this is when, if you see the ODH Lyme cases, this is when most people acquire the disease. And this is the nymph. You can see, in God we trust. It's okay to show that slide here, right, Pastor? In God we trust. Yeah. So you can see how small that little tick is. And so when you're doing it, looking through the hair coat of a dog, or looking on a child, it's the size, about the size of a poppy seed. It only takes 3 days to feed and drop off. So it's common that the folks who get this in the summer don't recollect ever having a tick attached to them. And this is a study that goes back. I just wanted to show you all were so close to this area. We did a study. I found the first black-legged ticks in Ohio in 2010, and where that square is. And the red dots were cases that occurred between 2002 and 2011. So you can see the number of cases were low. But there was an Amish community there that we worked with that had been seeing cases for more than 10 years before that. So the tick was probably there before, established before 2010. So we did some sampling of rodent population and ticks in these areas to see if the rodents were infected with the Lyme disease organism and to see if the ticks were infected. Because our healthcare professionals were saying to almost everybody, you can't get Lyme disease in Ohio because we don't have deer ticks and they're not infected with Lyme disease. Okay? So we put together a group. It was the health department, the vet school, and entomology. And we didn't have any funding. It was just the right thing to do. And we did this sampling there in Tiverton Township. We published this paper in 2014 establishing that these ticks were present and they were infected. So only 6% of the ticks were infected back then, so below 10%. We weren't very good at catching mice. We only caught 10, but 2 of them were positive for Lyme disease. And we found all 3 life stages. So the tick was established there, and we're carrying at a low level the Lyme disease organism. So the new tick person, Risa Pesapane, she came on board about 7 years ago, and one of the things I said is, why don't you do a 10-year retrospective? In other words, 10 years, now what's going on? Take a snapshot in the same location and see what's going on. And so on the left-hand side is essentially the study that we did back in 2010-11. On the right, you can see that out of 250 ticks tested, 54% were positive for Lyme disease, and 52% of the white-footed mice were positive. So you can see the ticks are much more widespread, and half the ticks are infected with Lyme disease. And so it's probably not going to get worse than that. Even in Connecticut, where it was first found, they pretty much, it's in the 50 to 60% range. So we're about the same as Connecticut now. Used to, you had to go to that area to get Lyme disease. Now you can just stay at home and get it in your own backyard. And it's really important that Dr. Rogers, what she's doing is so important from monitoring, because the pets are sort of the canary in the coal mine. They're getting anaplasmosis and Lyme disease, and they were seeing this happen, several years before we were seeing human cases. And this is just show you I think I have to click on the actual video. We'll see if it plays here. This shows you may want to avert your eyes. This is how a tick attaches. If I can get it up there. Oh, there it is. So the mouth parts of the tick slide up and down on a hypostome that has denticles that help hold it in the skin. So it excavates a hole in the skin, and at the same time it secretes a cement that holds the tick in place. So it forms a gasket around the mouth parts, so there's no air between the skin and the mouth parts. And then it's sort of like an anchor bolt holding the mouth parts in place, and then they alternate sucking of blood and injection of saliva. And so the disease organisms are actually in the saliva. And so it only takes them maybe 30 minutes, and they've already secreted the cement and attached. And for a tick that stays on for, like a dog tick female takes 10 days. So it really anchors itself in place, and in many cases you don't feel the attachment. So they're pretty amazing organisms from a standpoint of what they do. They keep your blood from clotting, your platelets from sticking together, they make your vascular system dilate, and they numb your skin while they take your blood. So they're almost the perfect parasite. All right. So this is important because the Powassan virus can be transmitted in as few as 15 minutes, spotted fever 30 minutes. For Lyme disease, it may take up to 2 days for transmission. But that's not to give you an excuse to be casual about, oh, I'll leave that tick on until tomorrow. Most people are pretty anxious to get it off as soon as they see it. So remove the tick and then save the specimen if possible. Putting it in hand sanitizer is a good way to go. A Ziploc baggie with some hand sanitizer works really well. The alcohol kills the tick. And of course, one of the main questions we get as tick people is, how do you get a tick off? And when I first came to Ohio, the health department person said, we get asked this question all the time because people want to use folk methods to get the tick to back out. Hot match or cigarette, fingernail polish, rubbing alcohol, Vaseline, and obviously a hot match followed by alcohol is a bad combo. And how long do you wait for a pink tick to back off? No, there's no literature on that. So anyway, we actually tested this. We put two kinds of ticks, Lone Star ticks and dog ticks, on the back of a Suffolk ewe and in lab conditions. And then we tested each of these multiple times on ticks that have been attached for 1 day and ticks that have been attached for 3 days. And none of these worked one time. So that's easy to remember, right? So I don't know how many kids, I remember kids getting burned because, Grandpa used a cigarette. And it's hard to say that Grandpa was wrong about something, but don't try any of these things because none of them work and they delay removal, okay? So that's the main thing. The tick is in, while you're waiting for a tick to back off, it may transmit those diseases, okay? So grasp it as close to the skin as you can with pointy tweezers. This wasn't pointy tweezers. Pull up with steady, even pressure, and then the tick will release. And then disinfect the site, wash your hands, and then save the tick. And this is a video my wife took of pulling a tick off my neck. And so, let's see. It's using a slotted tool, and I think Star and David, you have some tick removal tools that you can pick up. This is just one of those that's out there. And you can see the white stuff on the mouth parts. That's not skin, that's the attachment cement. So if you break the mouth parts off, leave the cement in the skin, don't worry about it. Main thing is you detached a potentially infected tick before it had a chance to transmit disease. And the slotted tools are great because your hair slides through, and especially on pets and things where you got a lot of hair, you're pulling hair out too. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So anyway, that's probably enough of that video too. So shower time, within 2 hours, remove attached ticks, save it. And this is great. Toilet time is a great chance to have a look around after you've been out in the field. So if somebody says, why are you taking so long in the bathroom, just say, I'm doing a tick check, okay? All right. So tick bite prevention, a number of approaches, but there is a lot of really good repellents. Consumer Reports every year does a review of repellents. And there's some out there with some natural products that do pretty well, but DEET needs to be 25 to 30%. So when you buy DEET, a lot of it is made for mosquitoes. 15% DEET probably works on mosquitoes, but for ticks, it's 25 to 30%. So you need to buy a higher concentration of DEET and apply it according to the time frame that they suggest. And that can be put on skin or on clothing. Picaridin is a new one you probably haven't heard about. A number of companies sell it now, 20%. It is from it's from a pepper plant. It's not the pepper itself that is the active ingredient, but it works really well and doesn't stink like DEET does. It also lasts up to 12 hours. So if you're out camping, you're in the open, you're out in the evening, if you put this off, it's going to get you through all night without getting a tick on you or mosquitoes and that sort of thing. So a lot of picaridin is showing up more and more on the shelf. You can certainly find it on Amazon. And so those two can be put on the skin and clothing, but the permethrin is only on fabric, on clothing. It can be put on camping equipment, on clothing. Usually when I'm out, I wear permethrin-treated pants, and I actually have on permethrin-treated socks. And then if you tuck your pants into your socks and you have permethrin-treated socks, then it's going to keep the ticks on the outside of your clothes, and they have to get past that permethrin barrier. And ticks are rarely higher than knee-high out in vegetation, okay? So just a few simple things, and these will last 70 hot water. The sock will wear out before the permethrin is gone, okay? So you could treat your own socks, your own pants, do it yourself. There, you can go on YouTube and find how to do that. You can get a concentrated permethrin, 10%, dilute it, put your pants in, roll them up tight in a Ziploc bag, let it soak it up overnight, and then air dry, and they're good for probably the life of the garment. Physical barrier, I just showed you. You know, tuck your pants in, wear long light colored pants. Light colored is just so you can see the ticks crawling on you. And then do frequent checks, the buddy system. And so this is stuff we have to start teaching our kids and grandkids. You know, they already know about sunscreen, buckling up. We just fold in the tick thing here. So remove them immediately, save the specimen. And then you can do a tick drag in your yard to find out if you have these ticks. And I forget where, oh, here it is. This is a legal tick drag. It's, you know, it's 36 inches. This is just cheap muslin, dowel rod, eye screws, nylon rope. And then the lady at church sews these for me. And these are just rocks that are sewn into the corners. So it's when it's breezy, it holds the cloth down on the deal. So you just walk around and say, here, ticky, 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 and the ticks get on. And so you can do your own tick survey. You could use a sheet, a towel, something like that, and just do a drag and see if you have these ticks on your property. So, okay. And then we've already heard Dr. Rogers talk to you about the tick side, or the pet side of it, because they can be bringing the ticks into your space. And a tick-safe zone, the CDC has this out here where you can keep the grass mowed, put in a mulch barrier, that's the brown thing in there. Ticks don't like to crawl across the dark mulch into the grass. And so these are things that you can do that help slow down maybe the invasion of your yard. But it's more important to do your own personal protection on the pets and on yourself. And these are some of the products that are out there that you can pick up, and they're on your shelves right now, usually on end caps along with the sunscreen, where you can pick up these repellents. And I just like to put this as one of the great tick myths in addition to how to get ticks off, is that ticks, they don't drop out of trees, and deer ticks don't have eyes, so how would they time their jump, you know? So anyway, that's one of the other. So do we have a big tick problem? Obviously, this was not a scientific journal. This woman allegedly had this tick on her back for 5 years, and so anyway, I'll just tell you right now, this is not true, okay? So can you see the poppy-sized tick on this picture? Can you pick them out? Yeah, okay. There it is. That's the size of the tick that you're looking for when you're doing a tick check. This is why using repellents and things like that and tucking your clothes in, playing by the rules, keeps these ticks on the outside of your clothing. So that's all I have, and I want to turn over to David. He's going to tell you the local story. And so I'm going to close these off and pull up his.
Yeah, you can bring in the tick. We also have on our website, we have a submission form where you can submit a picture. If you take a picture of the tick. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, where do we take ticks to get identified? At the health department, you can either bring the tick in, or on our website, we do have an area where you can upload, you can upload a picture of your tick, and we will answer back and tell you what tick it is, if we can identify. Okay, my name is David Hatley. I work at the health department. I'm an epidemiologist, so I work with a lot of data within the county. I'm going to focus mostly on Lyme disease. So these are rates within Knox County. Does this have a laser pointer? Yeah, great. So last year we had 124 cases, And this year we had 195. Oh, I apologize. In 2024, we had 124 cases. In 2025, we had 195. So that is a 57.3% increase from the year before. And when we look at Ohio as a whole, you can see that Ohio as well, in general, is going up. Overall, obviously our increase was significantly more than just Ohio. And this is by county for the region. We were the highest in our central region. So I pulled out here Fairfield County, they're at 49.7, and Knox County is 196.8. So what this is a rate, and rates we use to kind of equalize the comparison of the numbers. Because if there's a large population in one area and a small population in, say, like Knox County, we can easily compare those amount of infections. But you can see throughout all the counties we're the highest. I think Licking County is pretty close, 119. This is by year from 2020. You can see that the trend just escalates every year, except for 2024. We dropped a little. These are not, as our previous presenters discussed, these are not all the cases that I'm sure are in Knox County. There are probably plenty more that don't get reported to us. This is a distribution of cases. So I like to include this graph just to show that tick-borne diseases really don't have an age group. You can get any of these at any age. We do see very young children and elderly people as well that present with illness. 45.4% of them tend to be within this age group here, but that's a very large age group. So cases by male and female, as well, there's not really too much of a difference. But again, I like to include it just to show that at any age and any sex, you can get Lyme disease. This is the seasonality. So this is all of our cases from 2020 to 2025 by month. And you can see that 2025 was easily the highest year we've had. It's here in this light blue. And it also does not have a season. You're seeing people presenting with illness as early as January, February. Those tend to be the lowest months, but there's still people with illness, even in those early months, in cold months. And this is by county. As Glenn presented with some of his maps, you really saw it in this area here, the ticks and the Lyme disease spreading going this way. But some of these other counties, they could easily have, just as high of rates up in here. Oh, that's it. That's all I have.
I wanted to give Sarah Reed also a chance to speak, because she spoke last year. And so come on up, Sarah. One of the unreported cases, right?
I didn't know I was going to have to get up here. That's okay. So I talked last year, it was just about a year ago, having been diagnosed around Memorial Day, early June the year before. And I thought I was feeling better. So as the summer went on, I realized I really wasn't. And I tried some different things, and I finally ended up getting some blood work done. It was December by the time I got the results, and I still have the Lyme, I still have the Borrelia, and I also have the babesiosis, and I also have Bartonella, which Bartonella bacteria causes cat scratch fever, but it's a different Bartonella that causes this Lyme-like disease. So, yeah, I have all these symptoms, and I have a headache all the time, neck ache, my knees and ankles are swollen, and well, they're swollen, but they hurt like crazy. And so I've been on several different antibiotics. Right now I'm on 3 different things, and I'm starting a anti-parasitic drug, just like an anti-malarial kind of thing. And none of these are the doxycycline. Eventually, according to these people that I'm seeing, I will start with doxycycline at some point. They said it would be like a 6-month kind of treatment plan. And I take a lot of probiotics too. And so far, I'm okay. So I just wanted to, last year, Dr. Needham, you said to make sure that you test for these other tick-borne diseases, and I'm, a classic case of that. And my neighbor is here, Anita, and I have another neighbor, Cara, and we all live in basically the same yard, when you think about it. And I'm not sure if you have all the other goodies, but I know that my friend Cara has the same things that I have, the 3. So, there are different ways to try to go about treating that, and some are more successful than others, but I think, I guess that's all I have to say. Just to, if you don't feel good, and I kept thinking I just needed to rest and stop doing so much, because I'm kind of a busy person, and that didn't help. So I guess that's my main thing, is that you should get yourself tested and see what else you can do. I do wear permethrin-coated clothing when I mow the yard and check the bluebirds and all that jazz. So I'm very careful now. And I never had a tick. I never saw the tick, and I never had a rash. So I guess my question, and maybe nobody really knows, can one tick give you all 3 things? I figured. It was a hot tick, and now I'm a hot mess. That's all. Thank you for.
So my question for you is, because I want to dispel the myth a little bit, approximately how far from downtown Mount Vernon do you live?
A mile and a half. But we have woods all around, and we have deer, everywhere. They're in our yard. They practically come to the back door and ask for a handout.
So we do have, I won't point anybody out that's here, but we do have some folks that feed the deer, right? And I will say that we have a flower bed out in front of our church. And last year, there was a crew of volunteers replanting. Middle of the day, and one of them almost got run over by a reindeer. I mean, a deer, yeah. But they're here. They're within the city limits. And, I say that because a lot of people think, well, I'm in the city, so I'm okay. So that's just not true. All right, thank you. Questions? I'm gonna come around with the microphone so that your question can be heard online. So,
the dog, sorry, what was your name? Glen? You said the deer tick gets infected by mice, white-footed mice. They don't get infected by deer. So it doesn't
The
matter.
deer aren't affected by the Lyme disease organism, and deer meat venison is fine, even if they had deer ticks on them. The deer meat is fine, but the mice are not hurt by a massive infection of this bacterium.
So it doesn't matter if there's deer in your yard.
I think their deer are like everywhere and almost in everybody's yard. I just talked to Dr. Pesapane yesterday, and she said on the form, if you send a tick in for testing, it asks you where you likely picked up the tick, and 50% of the people who send in the tick got it in their yard. 50%. So it's in like the title of the, I didn't pick the title, I don't think, but they're in your backyard. And so this is why a tick drag can be so helpful in finding out, because you may be too worried. You know, if you do a tick drag and you don't pick up any ticks, doesn't mean you might have missed some, but it can give you some peace of mind that I did a tick drag and I didn't find any. And so it's more knowledge, more information. I found 2 deer ticks in my backwoods last fall, and had them tested, and they were negative. And my daughter lives a mile away, and I found 2 in their woods, and they were both negative. I've gone back since my own yard, and I haven't found any deer ticks. And so they were probably dropped off, and could be by deer just going through our backwoods.
But they ride on the deer and Bob.
What's that?
Do the deer carry the ticks?
They carry the ticks. The deer do carry the ticks, yeah. And one drops off, one female, there's 2,000 eggs. And so if there are mice, and there are mice in all these woods, you've got a starter set. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. I have a daughter who actually has chronic Lyme, and she's 3 now, so she picked up last year. So she's one of the 11 cases that were reported in Knox County. All of my daughters have been bitten by ticks in our yard. So we are proactively treating for ticks in terms of pesticides and using like the DEET products and making sure that we're using the products that are for ticks. But then once they get bitten by a tick, is it best to take them to the pediatrician? And what does testing look like after that? Because when she was bitten by the tick, we removed it, but the bullseye rash appeared in a different location on her body, and it didn't pick up for 2 weeks. And I saved the tick, thinking I should have this tested, and I didn't. So, like, what are the protocols for parents of kids in terms of like the timeline? Go to the pediatrician, health department. What do you recommend?
Hello? Yeah, so, hold it up. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So we recommend prophylaxis. So if you do find a tick on one of your children, you should take them to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician would likely give them a dose of doxycycline.
And then beyond that, like you have one that's chronic Lyme, like should I have her tested for other tick-borne illnesses? I mean, and it's the first time I've ever heard of this. The idea of
The question was, should you have her tested for other tick-borne
yeah,
illnesses?
because she's had chronic Lyme. Her symptoms of Lyme have not resolved.
Did they test her for other diseases when she got tested for
No.
Lyme?
So she probably should be tested for the other buffet organisms to see if she has babesiosis or some of the other diseases.
Is
And
that
it's,
something that's done in Knox County, or is that something I have to for fans in the ocean?
Your pediatrician, if they're local, they can test for all.
And do you have, can you put that screen back up that has those
diseases?
different diseases listed?
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you want to take a screenshot of that. Any other questions? Good questions, thank you.
If you have a tick and it's on your back and you live alone, how do you remove it? In the middle of the night, sometimes.
Glenn, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, that's, you're going to call somebody. Yeah, friend, neighbor, pastor, also Pastor Dale.
Okay.
Get them off as soon as you can. Yeah. And I think last year, when we had the TikTok, it was
Your question is about the feeding time, how long it's been on?
Yeah.
Can you tell by looking at it, or?
Like, before you start worrying about, your transmission.
Yeah, I think that the scientific information is kind of wobbly out there about how long the tick has to feed. It's kind of a general rule of thumb, but some of these things probably can be transmitted sooner, like Lyme disease. They say 2 days to 3 days for transmission. And it's because the germ lives in the gut of the tick, and it takes some length of time for it to get out of the gut into the tick's own blood and into the salivary gland. So it has to travel and infect the salivary glands to be injected in the saliva. And so for nymphs, it's thought to be 48 hours, but the tick feeds up in 3 days. So it's going to be almost poppy seed. So if you see a nymph that's not very big, it probably hasn't been on very long. But the general rule is if it's been attached, then it's potentially it could have transmitted one of these diseases. And then you just monitor for anything that's this flu-like set here that's not normal for you. The headache, fever, achy all over, and that sort of thing. And then the thing is, if you get tested, it will be negative for Lyme disease because the antibody titer won't be high enough if it's tested within a week or two of the tick bite. So you actually, and so if you go on doxycycline, it's going to treat it and the symptoms go away. You may not actually know if you had Lyme disease. And so this is why it's so tough to diagnose. There's so much depending on where you could have gotten a tick. And do you recollect having a tick on you? No. Well, you're in good company because many people don't ever recollect having a tick on them. But so this is why Pastor Liberati said you have to be your own advocate. And if in the eastern United States, nurse practitioners, urgent care, pediatricians are much more willing to give you doxycycline just to make sure. Whereas here, because of concern about resistance developing to antibiotics, it's almost like a golden rule. We're not going to give you this unless we know for sure. Well, now you're in no man's land. And especially if the test came back negative after a week, then if you tell the healthcare, or if you say, I was negative for Lyme disease, then they're going to assume it's something else. But the antibody titer wouldn't have been high enough to be picked up. So this is why you have to just be informed. And so if I had a tick on me long enough, I thought I would ask my primary care doc, just give me 10 days of doxycycline. And so I'm sure I'm not going to end up with Lyme disease. And so in Canada, you can go into a pharmacy and say you had a tick on you and it's a deer tick. They'll give you probably just one doxycycline to take it right then, and that will kill the spirochete in the skin right then. So you didn't have to have a prescription or anything. It's over the counter. So you have this whole spectrum of medical care trying to figure out how to do this. And you'll still run across in Ohio folks that will say we don't have deer ticks and we don't have Lyme disease. So it takes a while to penetrate, all the ways that we get medicine and treatment for it to for them to say, yeah, we should test you or we should treat you.
And that's exactly why we're happy to hear tonight for the second year in a row.
I'd also add that if you try to get the tick identified, that would also help because if you went to your doctor, we're recommending, Ohio Department of Health is recommending at this point that if it's a black leg tick, you can go and get doxycycline.
One of the things I just wanted to mention, which I thought of when I was up there and then promptly forgot, the Borrelia and the Bartonella bacteria both have a biofilm around the actual bacteria that is very hard, first of all, as they die off, the biofilm is a protein, and so even when they die and they fall apart into little tiny pieces, you still have this biofilm, this protein pieces floating around in your system before you clear all this out. And that, from what I've read and been told by reputable sources, I think, causes inflammation. So a lot of the chronic problems that people
that's part of the reason we like to do these talks and stuff, is so that to encourage people to advocate for themselves. You know, when you go to your doctor, if you feel like something's wrong, tell them, you know, hey, I was gardening the other day and found a tick on me, and you know, your doctor will be inclined to help you with that.
Borrelia is also, before it was called Lyme disease, I believe, it was referred to as relapsing fever, or not the bacteria, but the disease that was caused. And I don't know when they started calling it that, but I think that is a very apt name for it, because I do think it kind of comes and goes. And so I understand what you're asking, Clyde, and I don't know what kind of, other than to get tested. I've known people that have had it for years. Case in point, my neighbor here. One of the things that they will do after I go through this regimen is then they will do another blood test, and they'll tell me, oh, this is working, or maybe they'll tell me, no, this isn't working. And so that I don't know.
Okay. Well, I dug a tick out on the bottom of my thigh on March 30th, and I never felt it at all. I'd been to Florida maybe a week before, and so anyway, I had half of the tick. So I went to urgent care the next morning, and I got 1 dose of doxycycline and some, put Vaseline on it. So anyway, so this is a month and a half out, and I don't feel like I normally feel. I feel tired. I never felt tired. So my question is, maybe I go back and ask them, I want to be tested for this. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I'm just tired. I don't have all those other symptoms. I've never had a fever. The dermatologist, I happened to see him 2 weeks ago, and I said, can you just dig that out, because it still feels like there's like a, not a needle, but a little, like you have a thing in there that hasn't come out. It's still red and it kind of hurts. So he dug that out, scraped that out. It still kind of hurts, but I know that's out of there, but I don't know if it's still something or not. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation you want to have with your doctor. But if you found the tick on you, that's part of the importance of getting it identified. Again, just you can bring it to the health department. You could, send us a picture.
Like some legs and part of it,
Yeah.
There was a tiny bit of the body,
Yeah.
and the rest was still, I'm not.
So, do you have a phone? Can you take a picture of that screen for the next time you go into your doctor and say, here's what you, doc, here's what you need to test for. She's asking if the black-legged tick is more prevalent than the rest.
Say that again.
Is the black-legged tick the most prevalent of the ticks?
It depends on where you are. Yeah, I mean, the tick is everywhere, but it's not every place.
They lay eggs and they have thousands of, so that could create an area in my area where there are more of these black-legged than others.
Yeah, if you go to like a preservation park or metro park or wherever, you can be on a trail and with a tick drag and just no ticks, and then you hit a spot, there'll be 5 or 6 or more, something like that. And so, and when I used to do drags in these parks, sometimes I'd put wire flags in, so when people would be walking along, they'd know this was an area that might have ticks. But a tick drag is a good way to do an assessment and yeah, just see if they're there, and you avoid those places. And if you're on a trail, you're out, don't stop, because that's when the ticks can.
I can get 2 and 3 ticks a day sometimes just walking in my yard.
Yeah.
But I live in the woods basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're coming in from the woods,
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend treating your clothes with earth. So I've been hunting.
You could do you can buy these clothes now. I have a pair of pants, several pair of pants that I bought pre-treated, and there are websites. You can go on Amazon and just search for permethrin treated clothes, and that's how I got the socks. A pair of these socks is $12. Yeah.
So, or you can go the cheap route like I do. So I've been hunting since I've been probably 10 years old, and never didn't even know anything about treating my clothes until last year. And last year was the first year that I treated my clothes while I was hunting, and last year was the first year of going through an entire hunting season without any ticks on me. So, yeah. And what I did was I bought a gallon of it, and I just sprayed my clothes. Yeah. So. Okay, so my hunting clothes are a little bit different than regular clothes because I wash them first in a scent-free laundry soap, and so and then I treat it. But you can treat. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And then you can just spray. I have a big spray.
Yeah.
And I also
I
have
mean,
pre-treated
yeah.
pants, so I spray my shirt, my socks, and all the stuff. But even the
Exactly.
pants, you can wash.
You wash. And I usually get with my hunting clothes. I usually get one wash in the beginning of the season, and depending on how much hunting I do, I may wash them again middle of the season. But the permethrin, if I'm saying it correctly, it has lasted all season long. And I typically will sit. I have a turkey seat, so I'm really close to the ground. And the last few years have been the worst for ticks that I can remember. And I can remember sitting down and having just like watching these ticks crawl all over me, right? And it's like, and so one of the first things I have to do when I get home is I have to go through this regimen. Well, last year after I treated my clothes, I never had any ticks on me. It's very effective. So. Any other questions?
Probably a repetitive question. I'm trying to get this in my head because we live in the country in the woods. Our house is surrounded by woods. Deer pass through, but mice seem to be the culprit and the underlying thing, which I'm sure we have a ton of field mice out there. So a tick will bite through the mouse, get the disease, and then cling on to the deer that passes through, and then it's carried through the field or the woods or whatever. Or so the mice, like a little paranoid now with the mice,
Mm-hmm.
if you reduce your mouse population, is that helpful as well?
I think you'd have to reduce them to such a low level. It may make you feel better, but probably wouldn't help that much. They are actually products out there that you can put permethrin treated nesting material with permethrin, and they will carry that material to their nests, and that will kill the ticks in the nest. And they also have done studies where they treat the mice with antibiotic. They're able to clean up a local population of mice so they don't carry the Lyme disease organism. But these are pretty expensive and difficult, unless you're a professional, know what you're doing. And it helps if your neighbors do the same thing, Yeah. Yeah, that's a good.
I will say that we have a house out in Apple Valley, and my wife loves her plants, but what I've noticed is we tend to provide a buffet for the deer. We cannot keep hostas at our place. The deer just won't down, and they're from here to the house away, right? So just be mindful of that. Treat what you can. Treat your clothes if you can. I know that treating the clothes is very effective.
Another thing to do is my wife doesn't like ticks, and so when I've been out collecting, or if just I've been out splitting wood or something, when I come in, I put my clothes in the washing machine, or just put them in the dryer on a high setting for 20 minutes, and that'll kill the ticks. So if you're worried about bringing ticks in the house and you've been out in the yard, that's an easy thing to do. Yeah.